So what is the hardest day on the Camino Frances? It's a really common question for people planning their first Camino. And this week I thought I would talk about the 3 hardest days on the Camino Frances. So that's coming right up. So the 3 hardest days on the Camino Frances, let me share my sort of relatively limited experience of it. If you haven't been on the channel before, I've walked the Camino Frances 3 times, twice from Saint-Jean and once the last 200 k's or so. And it's a very common question for people planning their first Camino. How hard is it and what's the hardest day? And there are loads and loads of different opinions on it. So this week I'll talk about what I think are the 3 hardest days. And then at the end of the video, I'll explain how to not make any of the days hard. Okay, so it might sound strange, but you'll get it at the end. So the 3 hardest days. It's not specific. The 3 hardest days for me are the first day, the last day, and the middle day. Let me explain why. So it doesn't really sort of matter where you're starting, but let's presume maybe you're starting in Saint-Jean, which is a very popular place to start. Why is the first day the hardest? Well, if you're like me and you're not particularly fit, you're not really a hiker, and I think that's a lot of the people on the Camino, particularly the Camino Frances. It's kind of the beginner's Camino, I think. And a lot of people, quite obviously, are not used to sort of walking long distances and so on. So that first day is hard because maybe you're not used to that level of exercise, you're carrying a pack, you're walking quite a long distance, and you're going to be tired at the end of it, you're going to be aching, you're going to have sore muscles, sore feet, and kind of thinking, why am I doing this? Does it get any better? If you're starting in Saint-Jean, it's a little bit harder still because you've got that big steep climb out of Saint-Jean, which is really gets the heart going. On the plus side, though, your first day on the Camino, wherever you start, is going to be glorious. It's the excitement. It's finally starting out on your journey, so that kind of weighs it up. But that first day is generally pretty tough. Wherever you're starting, I would say start slow. There can be a tendency for people to overstretch themselves on day 1, and that just leads to injury. So the first day can be hard. The last day can be really hard. Why is that? You might think, oh well, I'm finishing maybe in Santiago. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be this feeling of joy and celebration, all the rest of it. For a lot of people, it's not. All of that happiness and joy might have been along the journey, and for many first-time pilgrims, when they get to Santiago, it's a bit of a letdown. It's it's over. This kind of almost new way of life that I've been living for 30, 40 days that I've enjoyed so much is over, and what happens next? So it can be a big anticlimax, the last day on your Camino. So you may have heard of that before, just be prepared for it. Enjoy every day of the journey and don't worry too much about the end of the journey. That's the secret, because you can feel a little bit let down on the last day. What about the 3rd hardest day? I reckon that's somewhere in the middle. And I'm not quite sure geographically, it's probably a bit past the middle. But I was thinking immediately of past the Cruz de Ferro, for example, and going down into Molina Seca. That's quite hard physically. It's a very steep downhill section. But I think also around the middle of your Camino, wherever you start and finish, particularly if it's a longer one, more than 2 or 3 weeks, you can start to think like, oh, is this really what I want to be doing? And you start to get sort of emotional head games going on. And so that can make that sort of middle period of your Camino quite tricky. And maybe that's why a lot of people fear the Meseta. Because is that kind of halfway? I'm not really thinking of the geography here. I should have got my map out, shouldn't I? Let me have a look at the John Brearley's guide. The Meseta's probably about halfway, if I think about it. Let me just have a quick look. Yeah, it is. So maybe that's why some people struggle with the Meseta, because it's starting to become emotionally challenging, and then they're in this more desolate environment, which I have to say I love. It's a great environment. So how do you overcome these days being the hard days? Maybe before I come to that, I should talk about what were my hardest days in reality. And it's very easy to think of my first Camino and some of the days that were really tough there. And they were generally days where I pushed on too far. I'm thinking particularly of Belorado through San Juan de Ortega, all the way to past Argus, it'll come to me, Atapuerca. For me, that was a really long day, about 32 Ks, and I shouldn't have tried to walk that far, and the last few Ks were on hard road, which really hammered my feet. I did myself a bit of damage on that day. So that was one really hard day. Another day was probably from Carrion to Terradillos. And from Carrion is that 17K section along an old Roman road where people say, you know, carry enough water and all the rest of it, that there tends to be a mobile cafe there. Again, that was a 30K plus day, and that's really pushing it for me. So my hard days tended to be when I was pushing a little bit beyond my comfort level, and I really started to hurt. I really had to sort of push myself along. So that brings me to how to not make any of the days hard. And what makes the day hard? So firstly, it's the physical effort. It might be, you know, a very steep incline. It might be a distance that's a little bit uncomfortable for you. My big message would be kind to yourself, be kind to your body, and don't push on further than you really feel comfortable doing. You know, if you've got time constraints, walk a shorter Camino. But certainly for me, the really hard days were when I pushed myself further than I physically felt comfortable to do. So that would be one tip. The other reason a day can be really hard is the emotional element of it. And I've spoken about this a few times on the channel. The Camino, yeah, it's a physical thing. You're walking long distances, but the challenge for me is much more in the head. It's much more an emotional challenge. And if you're that way inclined, a spiritual challenge perhaps. So you may find your hard days are in your head, not in your feet. And again, you know, be kind to yourself. Don't push yourself too hard on those days where you're feeling a little bit low and wondering why you're doing it. And, you know, there could be all sorts of things going on in your head. You're wondering about home or whatever, you know, call home, do whatever, you know, to sort your head out. Be kind to yourself, have a short day, go and have a nice meal, you know, spend time with people that you've met, you know, and let them lift your spirits a bit. So the hardest days in my mind are not going to be physical days, as long as you don't push yourself too hard. And I'll repeat it again, be kind to yourself physically and emotionally. Maybe the hard days could be emotional days for you. But if you are kind to yourself in that way, you don't push, and you're sensitive to your emotions and coping with all of that, what I really hope is that you can make every day on your Camino the best day. And I have to say, almost without doubt, I thoroughly enjoy every single day that I'm walking on Camino, whatever it turns out to be. And I think it really encourages, the Camino encourages this attitude of always looking for a silver lining, you know. So when things are down a little bit, look for the positives. And there are always loads and loads of positives. So is there a hard day on the Camino? Nah, not really. It's all in your head. What do you think? If you've walked a Camino down before, why not comment down below? What was your hardest day? Was it physical? Was it emotional? Was it spiritual? Love to hear from you.